So in these dark days with winter approaching, we are looking more and more for that glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to COVID. And this past week, we did have some good news because AstraZeneca, in conjunction with Oxford University, revealed that their drug, their vaccine, has done reasonably well in a trial. They said 70% efficacy. Well, that is not quite as good as what we saw with Pfizer and Moderna, but it's still passable because this is what we look for anyway in the usual influenza vaccine. This vaccine is using a totally different platform. This is not a messenger RNA vaccine as the others. This is based on something called a viral vector. In this case, what they do is they take an existing virus, in this case one from chimpanzees, which is not capable of infecting humans, and they remove the genetic material from that virus and they replace it with the genetic material of the coronavirus. So when this virus is injected into people, it will release the DNA of the coronavirus, which will then code for the spike proteins. And those are the proteins that we see in all of those pictures on the surface of the virus. And the body will then develop antibodies to that protein. Indeed, this is the concept behind all of the viruses. You try to trick the body into thinking that it has been infected with this protein, and the body will then develop antibodies to that. So when the real virus comes, there are already antibodies present. Now, there is something that is confusing about this AstraZeneca vaccine, though. This is a 2-dose vaccine like the others, but it turns out that the people who got a half dose followed by a full dose did better than people who got 2 full doses. And apparently this was an accident. Someone just measured things out wrong. But there was a sufficient number of people in this accidental group to demonstrate that they actually did better. This is very confounding because generally when it comes to vaccines or drugs, we look at the dose response curve. And usually the larger the dose, the greater the effect. The smaller the dose, smaller the effect. And here we have a situation where a smaller dose gives us a better effect. Unfortunately, so far, all we have is the press release. We don't yet have the published data. So we need to see the peer-reviewed paper before we come to any kind of conclusion. There are benefits to the AstraZeneca vaccine, though. It is much cheaper, only about $3 per dose, as opposed to $20 to $30 for the others. And it does not have to be transported at sub-zero temperatures. And that, of course, would be a big plus for distribution around the world. But the fact that it is only about 70% effective, and in fact, the 2-dose version was only 60%. The half dose followed by the 1 dose was much higher. That's how you average to 70%. You ask the question, is it worthwhile to take a 70% effectiveness when the drug is cheaper and easier to produce? Or do you go for the 95%, which is going to be more expensive and more difficult to distribute? So these are interesting questions that will have to be answered. On the other hand, AstraZeneca is gearing up to be able to produce far more doses of the vaccine than the other companies. So there we go. It's a positive step forward, but there are some flags that go up with this AstraZeneca vaccine. First of all, we don't know whether or not it reduced asymptomatic disease because they looked only at symptoms. And it is always difficult to judge just by press release. We have to wait until we see the hard data published in peer-reviewed literature. Nevertheless, that glow at the end of the tunnel is starting to be just a little bit brighter.